Welcome, everyone. You're listening to the ImPerfect Podcast. I'm Kathy.
And I'm Kennedy. Join us on this week's episode as we discuss intriguing topics and people of interest that will inspire us to explore all of the unique pieces of ourselves.
We are all imperfectly perfect.
We're glad you're here.
Hi, everyone. Welcome back to our next episode of the ImPerfect Podcast. Humans communicate and contribute to conversations in many different ways and through several different mediums, even like how we're communicating with you now on our podcast through to you on your medium of choice. Different forms of communication can include verbal communication, obviously, and nonverbal communication, written communication, listening, and even visual. Nonverbal communication can be very complex, and we thought we'd take a look into that today.
Yeah, so nonverbal communication contributes so much to a conversation that we often don't even realize until it is missing from the equation. So some suggest that 65% of conversations are nonverbal, which is strange because when you think communication, you think blah, 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 not the little things that happen with your hands or whatever. So, for example, when text messaging, you may find yourself feeling like you need to add emojis to show what facial expressions you would make if you were in front of the person that you're communicating with. So, if you were to text, "What are you doing?" it could be, "What are you doing?" with an angry emoji, or it could be, "What are you doing?" with a happy face emoji. So depending on the expression or the tone or, the nonverbals, which would be smileys or sad faces or angry faces, it can totally change a message.
Yeah, it sure does. And we've lost that part of a lot of our communications, like doing things online, because a lot of times, you can't see the rest of my body. Am I, swinging my leg back and forth? If I got my
Right.
arms crossed, like, how would you know, right? So,
Right. Right.
according to Indeed.com, nonverbal communication is the transfer of information through body language, facial expressions, gestures, and more. So many say that the key to success in relationships, either personal or professional, is learning actually how to communicate effectively and properly. And a lot of that is through nonverbal cues and body language.
Yeah, and on Help Guide's website, they mention how body language is the use of physical behavior, expressions, and mannerisms to communicate nonverbally, often done instinctively rather than consciously. So even when I'm talking, like my eyebrows kind of go up and down, and like I don't think about raising my eyebrows, or for the most part, I don't. It just happen. Like, see, there it happened again. So it just happens instinctively.
Yeah, because whether you realize it or not, the way you stand, whether you're crossing your arms, your hands in back of you or in front of you, your tone of voice, eye contact, all those things can greatly impact how much someone will trust you, feel drawn towards you, want to buy your product, all of those sorts of things. And I recently listened to a piece that was talking a little bit about this sort of thing. And I had not realized, often you'll see in maybe the service industry that people are standing off to the side waiting to serve, of course, but they're just being patient, and they'll either cross their hands in front of them like this, or they'll put them behind their back. And I never took offense one way or the other to how they were holding their hands. But in this actual program, it talked about approaching people with your hands behind your back, and how automatically it's a built-in response from, I don't know, caveman days or something like that, that people that keep their hands hidden, it sends off certain signals in the brain that can alert of danger. If you
What are you
saw the
hiding behind your back kind of thing?
Yeah, well, if you saw the other caveman approaching with his hands behind his back, it probably meant he had a sharp rock to clobber you with, right? So
Right.
that kind of activation is still apparently going on in our brains. Like they explained the experiment and how they had people all hooked up, and that's what they found, that it certainly lit up those danger, fight or flight parts in the brain. And
Mm.
yeah, I guess we don't like to not see people's hands.
Yeah, but it's true when you say it like that. It's but even though you're standing there and you're going, oh, that's just a server standing off to the side with their hands behind your back, your body is like, what's like, you're not consciously thinking about that, but it's there is I think what you're getting at. Because I'm sure some people listening are like, well, I know they're not holding a, you know,
Rock.
a hammer behind their behind their back, obviously not, but the setting doesn't suit a hammer. But yeah, it makes sense.
Maybe
Even
don't
when
come into work tomorrow.
right, right. Even when you're silent, your nonverbals are still communicating loud and clear. So a great example of this would be, have you ever gotten a face from your partner from across the room when you're out in public at an event somewhere, and the face is basically like, okay, it's time to go home. Like you just get the eyes, or you guys have your own like nonverbal, like a wink or like a frustrated face. Like I've gotten those faces before. So
Or the
um
ever popular mother face of
like, what are you doing? Yeah, it doesn't you don't have to say anything, but the nonverbals speak a million words.
yeah, for sure. It's also important to note that sometimes the words that are coming out of your mouth and the way you communicate through your body language can be totally different and contradict each other.
Yeah, and it's funny because I'm aware of these things, I often pay attention to them when I'm having conversations just in everyday life with other people. So when someone's talking to me and they continuously, like, if they're talking and they go, yeah, so the other day, and they just touch their nose, this is actually one of the most common and well-known nonverbals in psychology that can indicate a liar. Or it could very well just be that they have an itchy nose. I mean, use your discretion there, but um I'm just saying, if someone's saying, yeah, so the other day I was thinking about you and I was just thinking about how, just question why, if they repeatedly touch their nose. Anyway, I find myself, I'm one of those people that I'm analyzing every move, so watch out.
Well, I think it seems kind of funny that it would be based on the Pinocchio story, but that's what it
Yeah,
made me think of, right?
exactly.
Every time Pinocchio lied, his nose would grow. So it's like you're trying to keep your nose
Exactly.
growing. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, so other examples would be when someone says yes to you verbally, but they are shaking their head no. So, and it's hard to give an example of this without making it seem super obvious. But if I said, yeah, so the other day I was just like, man, that's a nice person, and they're shaking their head, they're going, like, you just have to question why there's that contradiction happening. Why are you shaking your head while you're saying something in agreement to whatever? Anyway, it's just, once you're aware of these things, you start to notice them. Like, I'll be watching TV shows and there'll be actors doing things, and I'll say to my boyfriend, did you see that? You know, you can tell they're acting because they didn't agree with what anyway, it's just, once you're aware, it just becomes so prominent.
Kennedy getting right into the show and it's already written like it's a script. It's not really a real criminal Kennedy. So
Right, right.
yeah. I also had gotten some information in regards to this about liars pointing their feet towards the door, signaling, their desire to physically or psychologically escape this uncomfortable situation that they're in.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I can't say the word properly, but the suprasternal notch, I think is how it's pronounced. So it's the indentation at the base of your neck. So if you just feel your neck there, everyone's got it right there. It is the most vulnerable part of the body. And mom also found this, that when liars feel that they're threatened, they sometimes cover that area to protect themselves against threat. So you even think, do you ever see like a woman playing with their necklace, or a man adjusting his tie? It's that uncomfortable and the need to cover that part of their body because it's super vulnerable.
Yeah. Yeah. So, however, if you can effectively work on your own communication skills and be aware of others and their communication styles, it can help create more understanding and solid relationships. If you're knowing how, if your partner does have a tell that's not an actual, lie tell or that sort of thing, then you just kind of get used to their mannerisms, I
It's
guess.
funny you say it like that, because just back to the nose thing, my poor boyfriend, he puts up with a lot. He'll be telling me something and he'll touch his nose, or he'll keep touching it or whatever. And I'll be like, why are you touching your nose? And he'll go, Kennedy, like, gosh, like I have a mustache hair up there, or I just kissed the cat. There's all these hairs flying around my nose, like chill out. Or but I say it as a joke now because he sees it coming. When he's touching his nose, he looks at me and he's like, oh gosh, she's gonna tell me that I'm touching my nose.
Yeah.
Yeah. So when your nonverbal cues match up with the words you're saying, they can actually help increase trust, clarity, and rapport versus tension, mistrust, and confusion with other people. So this is the benefit to being aware of your nonverbal communication as well as others.
Yeah, there's lots of nonverbal communication that we already talked about, but in becoming aware of your own nonverbal communication, we can look at certain different types. There's a number of them. Facial expressions, this is pretty much universal. It's the same interpretation pretty much no matter what culture you're referring to. The happy face is pretty much universally the signal of like, hey, let's be friends.
Yeah, yeah.
Put a rock behind my back.
Right. Then there's body movement and posture. So think about the difference between someone who's slouching and dragging their feet across the floor versus someone who has got good posture and actually walks with purpose.
Yeah. And there's even some gestures like the okay sign and that sort of thing. It's or the thumbs up, positive messages throughout the world. And but in some places I've actually read about that some of our good gestures might not be considered the same good over there, and might actually be offensive to some people in certain parts of the world.
Right. So when you're having conversations with someone, it's important to know what would be considered positive or negative to them when it comes to different gestures or body movements, things like that. So another one would be eye contact. So the way you look at someone while you or they are talking can communicate many more things than just the eye contact. So, have you ever had the person that's looking at you and then suddenly they're looking behind you, and then they look back, and then they look over there, and then they look back, and it's like, you're not interested at all in what I'm saying right now.
Yeah. Also touch, have you ever shaken,
Shook.
somebody's hand, shaken, somebody's hand, and they have a firm handshake as opposed to a weak, limp one. I've met particular men and they reach out to shake your hand and you're thinking, wow, like he's a big guy and I'm really going to get a strong handshake here. And it's just kind of this limp. It's
Mm,
confusing,
mm. And it can
it,
set the tone of the conversation, really.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah. Another one would be space. So how close you stand to someone can also impact conversation. So being too close to someone can exert dominance, or it can be very intimidating for the other person. So that's just an example.
And voice also. So it's not just what you say, but how you say things. It can include volume and spacing. Uh, if you have a rest between your replies and the tone you're using, that sort of thing.
Yeah. So there's obviously a lot more to a conversation than people realize. And this could even intimidate or scare some people who already are hesitant to have a conversation in the first place. So people who are shy or things like that. But Mom and I even criticize ourselves and each other on how we present ourselves on the podcast and how we can improve. So this isn't meant to intimidate anyone into not communicating, because then they have to overthink or overanalyze everything they're doing when they're already hesitant to have conversations with people or shy. It's just something to be aware of.
Yeah. Or you could just, if you're feeling shy or awkward yourself, you could watch a few of our TikToks and you'd feel better about things.
You'll feel way better about yourself.
Yeah, it is interesting for me, especially because I was, this is pretty much my first on-camera experience. And even looking back from when we began, it I see a big change. I hear a change in my voice also. And, depending on the week, whether, the topic is peppy or whether we're tired and we sat here and ate something that had a lot of carbs in it. I can look back at the episodes and, almost it's a marker for what we were doing that night or the kind of mood we were in or the subject matter. And, but I do see progression overall. So that's really encouraging.
Yeah, I see a difference as well, not just in yours, but mine as well, ours as a whole. Just how we present ourselves and how more comfortable or uncomfortable we were before or hesitant but yeah, just as a different side of things as well with nonverbals. So important to remember that not everyone has good intentions. So nonverbal communication and awareness can also be used to manipulate people if controlled strategically. So because nonverbals can also be faked by people. So as an example, some people love to exert dominance in a situation by perhaps staring you down. Some people love to wave their arms around while they speak. They like to talk loudly over you, puff their chest and put their hands on their sides as if they're some big macho person. And some people don't realize they do this either, but some unfortunately know exactly what they're doing. And as a contradicting example, some people attempt to portray a certain positive persona about themselves, as if they're approachable. So some people like to use I like to call them fluffy words and pair them with welcoming body language. So this can actually be a wolf in sheep's clothing sometimes. So people are trying to fake it so much that it isn't genuine. So there's both sides of it. But the point is that you have to trust your gut and be aware of the people that may be trying to manipulate you and use and just have their behavior being inconsistent or wishy-washy. So the main point is actions speak louder than words. So if nonverbals are something that can be learned, they can be learned for the wrong reasons as well.
For sure. So the big question is, how do you improve your own nonverbal communication? I mean, we all unintentionally send signals, when we're not at our best, when we're not thinking about things like that. So firstly, we would suggest that you need to be working more on being present. We looked up an excerpt from Help Guide's website, and it said, nonverbal communication is a rapidly flowing back and forth process that requires your full focus on the moment to moment experience. If you're planning what you're going to do or say next, checking your phone or thinking about something else, you're almost certain to miss nonverbal cues and not fully understand the subtleties of what's being communicated. So we didn't think we could have said that much better ourselves. So we just took it right from the site.
Yeah. Well,
Well,
it's said perfectly, and it's so true. If you're not looking at the person, how are you supposed to pick up on 65% of the conversation that is not verbal, right?
yeah, it's true. Like you said, the eyebrow raise, the eye roll, the slight sigh, the downward look, that all says something.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So managing your stress is the second point at getting started, as it can affect one's delivery when they communicate. So, a simple example, I'll put myself out there. I often can communicate in such a way to my boyfriend in the heat of a moment and realize later that I did and said certain things that are not typical of me. I did it only because I was stressed. And so then I go to apologize. And explained to him that it was just very heat of the moment situation. So by managing your stress, you'll find that you'll better be able to communicate, first of all, but also your nonverbal. So some people tend to point when they try to put off aggression or whatever. So it's just a good step to take.
Yeah. And on that same note, our last point was develop your emotional awareness. So we all could stand to become a little more aware of our emotions and how they impact us. Uh, and so they would help us to better control our communication techniques. It's also important to be able to pick up on other people's emotions behind the cues that they are making. There's so many people disconnected from their emotions, especially the stronger ones like anger, sadness and fear. Can put it together there. But yeah, all through our childhood, we're taught in society to shut that off. You can't be angry, don't act like that, and I'll give you something to cry about, and all those lovely things. So we're not encouraged to feel those emotions, and working on trying to better connect to yourself and your feelings, you'll actually gain greater control over how you think and act yourself. So it can really, in my experience, perceive how others, it can, what am I trying to say?
I know what
it,
you're trying to say. Yeah.
it can really impact how others perceive you, and you might be sending out messages that you don't intend to or you don't
Mm,
mean. Sometimes people can be cold or feel uncomfortable in a situation and they cross their arms, but it looks to me, if I was to see Kennedy do that, I'd think, well, what's wrong and why is she closing herself off, and what did I say something to offend her? So I might be perceiving that when really that wasn't her intention to send as a message.
mm, mm. So, just as a last point, we also wanted to bring attention to a TV series that we both enjoyed. Although it's fictional in its stories, the psychology behind the script is accurate with a few exceptions. So, the TV series is called Lie to Me. So, the premise of the show is actually a company of nonverbal experts who are able to tell if someone is telling the truth or being deceptive. So, Lie to Me actually staffed Dr. Ekman, who can be related to Dr. Lightman in the show. And he served as a scientific advisor on set, and he taught the cast and crew about the actual science of deception detection.
Yeah, I really, really enjoyed that show,
Mm.
and actually ended up with the DVDs, and we'll watch it at the cottage in the summer, because we don't have cable and all that fun stuff out there. So, um, interestingly enough, many of those episodes feature references to Dr. Ekman, and his actual real life experiences when he was working in the field. And because Lie to Me is a fictional show, there is, however, some fact and fiction mixed in together. But we really wanted to share that with you because it was super interesting, and just a overall good show, a fun show to watch, and it goes through some of the nonverbals.
Mm, hmm. Yeah, so there are obviously so many little examples of how nonverbals can play into our life. So, your lip can twitch randomly, or your eyes can look up or down, or it's funny how just the simple, like, if I'm talking to you right now and you're talking about something and I just go, and for those that aren't watching video, just looking over to the side with your eyes can put off this like disgust vibe. And I didn't even have to say anything. So there's so many little things in our life like that.
You mean
Um, Sorry?
you mean the eye roll? Is that
Yeah.
what you?
Well, the
Yeah.
eye rolls, maybe. Sorry, you couldn't see it here. Want me to do it closer? Want me to become intimidating and get really close to you?
Well,
But
if you puff your chest out.
right, right, right. But yeah, the eye roll. It's funny how an eye roll can just give off so much without a word being spoken, as all these little things.
Another one for me is the exhale. Like,
Yeah,
like I'm frustrated. Like I already
right.
told, stop bugging me or whatever. But I know for me, I often look off when I'm remembering something.
Mm.
Like if I have to think about how, the chain of events played out or a memory from the past. And I notice that's only like, I only really notice it since we've been doing the podcast. Maybe I've always done it, but it's like a think and a remember all at the same time. I don't know if they're stored like back here in this
Your
part.
brain's like trying to look, your eyes are trying to roll back and look back there. Where are you? I'm trying to find you.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I guess it's fair to say that you can say what you mean, but not mean what you say. So there's a lot of information that we rolled out here today. Very interesting things, but yeah, we hope you enjoyed. So thanks again, and you know where to find us next week.
I'll see you next time.
If you or someone you know has a unique story to tell, we'd love to hear from you. Email us at theimperfectpodcast@outlook.com.
For more information and how to connect with us on social media, you can visit us at our website, theimperfectpodcast.ca.
And from whichever platform you are listening to this episode, be sure to like, share, and leave us a review. We would really appreciate your feedback. Thank you so much for listening to today's episode.
We look forward to hearing your feedback and seeing you all find that extra joy and embrace your own imperfect.
See you next week.